Morning and welcome, everyone. And this morning, as you know, we're here to talk about some of the practical strategies to help you let go more in your business, let go of control, stop being the bottleneck, and actually create more time to focus on where you can add most value in your business, or more time to do whatever you want with, really. And I always remind people of my vision in terms of why I believe we exist as a coaching company, and that's to empower business owners to achieve their dreams. And for me, most business owners did not go into business to work constantly, every waking hour, always being on, and to become consumed by their business. And I know that's the reality, unfortunately, for many, many businesses, but it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't have to be. So what I'm doing today is really sharing some of the most important strategies that I've seen over the years to help you overcome this challenge of letting go and how you can actually do that. So I'm going to share it's 43 minutes now. It's going to be intense. I'm just going to share a lot of information with you in that time to help you. And as ever, I mean, this is a picture of my team, and I just wanted to make the point that I'm not coming at this from a theoretical perspective. Everything I'm sharing today is practical, tangible things that we use, that me and my team use with the whatever it is, 80, 90 businesses we coach every month, and that we use in our own team. So I use this in my business as well. In fact, there's 9 of us. We're 5 coaches and 4 support team. And I worked out the other day, just before this event, that I spend 2.5 hours a week in meetings with my team, and maybe 30 to 60 minutes on top of that interacting with my team. That is it. That is it. So about 3 to 3.5 hours a week with my team. The rest I've let go of. The rest they are managing. And I know that's the dream for many of you. The dream, but not the reality. So I'm coming at this from a practical perspective of what's really stopping you letting go. What's really stopping you? And the first thing I want to talk about is actually, you all have your reasons. And I know some of you know us really well, and you've told us those reasons. You've told us what's stopping you letting go. So you told us the reasons why you're not letting go. I want to look at the flip side of that argument, first of all, which is, what's the cost of not letting go? What's the impact of not doing anything about it? And the most common impact that we see is this. How many of you have been in this position where you are constantly juggling and trying to do everything? And why is that happening? Because most, if not all, the decisions in the business are going through you. Most, if not all, of the problems or issues that come up end up on your plate. And of course, if that's the reality, you're this crazy, busy, overwhelmed person trying to deal with all that. When are you actually running your business? When do you actually have the time to do the high impact work that's needed to actually run or grow your business? When can that happen if you're the bottleneck and every decision and every problem is going through you? And some of you maybe are living this reality right now, where it's all coming through you. And so you don't really have the time or enough time to focus on the high impact work. Or you end up doing it at silly times, like, oh, Prague, I do that in the evenings or at weekends. And that's just a cost of not letting go of the fundamentals that you really shouldn't be having to do. So the cost of inaction is, if you're that person that's constantly overwhelmed and busy and stressed, and I've been there about 10, 12 years ago, that was me. until I realized that's not the way I could run my business. Because when you become the bottleneck, you become the cap to growth, because you're so busy just trying to get stuff done that there's little focus on growth. And so that the business plateaus, it stagnates, because you can't do any more. So you become stressed and overwhelmed. The business growth stagnates or plateaus. Cracks start appearing in perhaps how you're servicing your customers, your clients. And if that wasn't bad enough, you go and talk to any professional investor, venture capitalists. In fact, I was just talking to one of the directors from the largest business brokers in the UK just last week. And they all say the same thing. They say, Parag, the number one thing we're looking for in a saleable asset or an investable asset, the number one factor we look for is a business that works largely without the owner or owners. Because why would anyone invest their money in something that's completely reliant on you? So I know that may or may not be a goal for any of you here, but the mindset is interesting, isn't it? That they would look at the business as an asset if it works without the owner. And yet most businesses are running completely the opposite way, with the cost and consequences that often has on the person at the top. So there is a cost of inaction. There is a cost of not letting go, a very real cost. So what can you do about it? That's the question you're all here to understand. What can you do about it? Now, I've put this quote here from Seneca, the Roman philosopher and Stoic. Because how many times have we seen this as coaches, that often what's stopping you, what's going on in your mind that's stopping you is not actually the truth or the reality. It's what's going on in your mind. And it's really, really common. It's really common because fear is a common human emotion. It's normal, guys. It's normal to be fearful of letting go of certain tasks in your business. It's absolutely normal. Our brains are hardwired to behave that way. We have this emotional center of our brain called the limbic system, which directs our emotional responses to things. So it's completely normal that we are fearful of things within our business and in life generally. It's a normal human condition, especially with all the changes that we've experienced in recent years, inflation and COVID and Brexit. You know, every day there's a new challenge. It's normal to be fearful. However, we have to understand also that those fears, as I said, may or may not be real. And if there is inaction, if you let that fear stop you from even trying, then there's no way forward for you because of the bottlenecks we talked about earlier. So we use an acronym for fear, FEAR, false expectations appearing real. False expectations appearing real. In other words, that fear, whatever's stopping you letting go, and there'll be many, many reasons, whatever's stopping you may appear real to you. But very often that may not be the reality, because our emotional brain is telling us that everything could go wrong, but it's an emotional reaction. And I'll just give you a little insight to prove that fact. When the experts on these kind of concepts have studied what are the most common human fears, and there's a couple of fears that consistently rank higher than death or being broke. What on earth could they be? The most common fears that rank higher than death or being broke. Spiders. I kid you not. Spiders, heights, and the one that usually comes out top, public speaking. Those fears commonly, consistently rank higher than death. So what does that tell us, guys? What that tells us is the fears that we experience may feel real, but actually they're not logical. They're not logical. It's not logical to fear those things more than death. And yet we do. And it has a real impact on us. So I just wanted to make that point because we see it so often when coaching people. We give them the strategies to help them let go. But very often it's what's going on in here that stops them. And fear is a powerful, powerful thing when you let it stop you. So understanding that it may or may not be real is important. Now, let's look at some of the practical strategies I want to share with you to help you manage these risks. Because letting go really is a risk management exercise. That's how I see it. Yes, there are risks. They may be real, they may not be. But how do you manage those risks? Because if you don't manage those risks, we're back to the costs of inaction. So how do you manage those risks? So let's start. I'm going to share 6 key strategies with you. Now, number 1, let's look at getting the right people in your business, because you're going to need people to give certain tasks to. Now, I'm sharing with you here a study done by Gallup. Gallup, the polling company, have done studies consistently year after year on levels of workplace engagement. And what they found is 3 types of employees in the workplace: engaged, non-engaged, and disengaged. And the interesting thing they found, guys, is what proportion of the UK workforce is either a number 2 or number 3 on the screen there. So not engaged. In other words, they're there at work, they're doing the job, but do they really care deeply about the work they're doing? And the answer is not really. They're there ultimately for the paycheck. And then you've got the 3s there, the disengaged, who really don't care at all. In fact, they're saboteurs. They've put the anchor down. They're holding you back. So they're pretty obvious to spot. But then you've got the 2s as well, who'll turn up. They'll even be loyal, but actually they're not going to step up. They're not going to push themselves. They're just doing what needs to be done to get paid. What proportion of the workforce do you think Gallup have found consistently are 2s and 3s, depending on the year of the survey? Oh, someone's volunteering an answer there. What was that?
70.
Yeah, Chris, 70?
70.
Yeah, it's even more. Depending on the year, it's somewhere between 80 and 93% of the population. Now, you could say, oh, God, that's terrible. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's various reasons for that. But ultimately, as business owners and employers, you want the people who do care. You want the people who are going to step up and be engaged. And that is a small minority. So the first thing I want to make the point of here is people say to us, it's hard to find good people. It's hard to find good people. Yes, it is hard to find good people. So when you're looking to be able to step back and let go more, your job is to find good people. And yes, that's hard. But it means you have to be better at recruitment. You have to be better. What is the one thing? I'm coming up to my 18th birthday in business now. I think it's literally like tomorrow, I think. 18 years. What is the one thing I've seen done consistently badly in small businesses? Recruitment. I would pick that one every day. Biggest mistake I see is lousy, sloppy recruitment. So I'm going to highlight 4 frustratingly, ridiculously common mistakes. Now, let me give you a typical scenario here. So you got your business and somebody says, oh, I'm off. And you're like, oh, panic. I've got to hire someone. Now, you've already made the first mistake. You've already made the first mistake, that last minute desperate hiring. You've got a seat to fill. You've now got to find someone. How quickly do you have to find someone? As soon as possible, because you've got a seat to fill. And if you think about that, you think about how much exposure does that give you to the marketplace if you've got to make a desperate last minute hire because somebody's leaving. You know, the time you've got there to find someone good, yep, you might be lucky. You might be lucky, but the chances are you're just going to get whoever happens to be looking for a job at that moment in time. Too late. Too late. Last minute hire is one of the biggest mistakes. Ideally, you should be looking to always be hiring, always have exposure to the market, always be looking for great people. Because then when you need them, you're not desperately looking around trying to find whoever's available. And actually, you look at how big companies, how corporates recruit. I started my career actually as a chartered accountant 31 years ago. Is that right? Yeah, 1994, PwC. And I remember I came out of university going to job interviews with big corporates because I thought that's what you do as a kid. And they hire completely differently. They are always looking. They are always looking, constantly looking for the best talent because they understand that they can't leave it to the last minute, which is exactly what most small businesses do. So last minute hiring, huge mistake. Number two, you put that job ad out desperately because you need a seat to fill. And you get a load of CVs back or a few CVs. Over reliance on CVs, second big mistake. What does a CV tell you about their attitude? What does it tell you about what they care about, what they believe in, what they're motivated by, what fulfills them, what excites them, what their goals are? What does CV doesn't tell you anything about that. So the recruitment process really should be about screening and testing for attitude, not just for the skills you see on a CV. You cannot just rely on skills in a CV. Attitude is far more important. Skills can be taught. Skills can be taught. But can you teach someone to care? Can you teach someone to have the right attitude? Well, good luck with that one. Because most people have got those inherent qualities inbuilt with them from childhood, from when they're growing up. So it's going to be a very, very impressive leader who can change inbuilt behaviors and attitudes. So you want to find people who've got the right attitude. That's the purpose of the recruitment process, not just to screen people out based on CVs. The third thing about recruitment here is, I talked about your recruitment process. That's assuming you have one. That's assuming you actually have a recruitment process. Most businesses, it's 1 or 2 interviews. That is not a recruitment process. A recruitment process should be thorough, should be involve screening, testing for skills, testing for attitude, involvement with your teams. It's a thorough recruitment process is not 2 interviews. And the fourth thing I want to say about how badly recruitment is done is cultural alignment. Are you aligning the potential recruit with your company culture? And what that assumes is you actually have defined the values and culture in your business. You've actually defined it in the first place. It's not just 5 words on a website. You've defined what your culture and values are, and you have explained that and educated the recruits in the recruitment process. Again, this is what successful corporates do, actually, because they understand the importance of cultural alignment. So they're educating people. So the people who know they don't fit will actually deselect themselves. They'll be like, "No, this isn't for me," which is great. That's what you want. You want people to deselect themselves who don't fit. You want them to understand what the culture is like in your organization. In fact, I'll give you an example. Our longest standing client, Deliciously Sorted, an events company in Ibiza, and we've been coaching them since 2011. And they very, very a lot of people want to work for that company. Very glamorous company, do events for A-list celebrities and people like that. But there is a key point of their culture that they need to educate people on. And that is that in the summer, they are ridiculously busy because that's when they do most of their work. And so they now educate their potential applicants on what the summer period really looks like. Like, how many hours are you going to be working? What are you actually going to be doing? When are you going to get time off, if at all? You know, and they're fully transparent and honest about it because it's part of their culture. Part of their culture is to serve their clients and be there for some very, very wealthy, demanding people. That's part of their culture. They tell people that, so the people who don't want that can step out of the process. At least the applicants understand that point of culture. In my business, the number one point of culture: no babysitting. No babysitting. In other words, everyone who comes and joins our team knows that they have to take full ownership and responsibility for the tasks and the goals that they're given. I'm not going to hold their hand because I'm too busy coaching. They have to work out problems for themselves. It's part of our culture. Everyone on our team knows that. So that if an applicant doesn't really want that, they don't have to join our team because we've explained it to them. So that's just my 4 there. I mean, there's loads of mistakes. That's just 4 I wanted to highlight today. Because if you can't get the right people on the bus, it's very hard for you to let go. In fact, pretty much impossible. Now, the other thing I want to say, allied to poor recruitment, is probation. Is how you use your probation period. The probation period is there to protect the employer. There is no such thing as a perfect recruitment process. You could do everything we coach people on here, and there's a lot of tweaks and improvements. You could do all of that. There's no guarantee you're going to find the perfect hire. You're still going to get some duds. That's why you have a probation period, so you can weed out the wrong people with the wrong attitude quickly before they damage your business. Before they damage you. Because that's what happens. They become the focal point of your stress, of your time, of your energy, because you made the wrong hire and you didn't weed them out quickly enough. So probation is there to protect you. So again, enforcing probation. How clearly is that explained in your recruitment process? How clearly are the performance standards explained and actually written down? Here's what your performance standards are for your probation. This is what you need to be showing us every week. If you're not able to show us this, we can't keep you in employment post-probation. Clear performance standards that are monitored weekly. And it's fair. You're being fair to them and clear on what's expected. So it's not a surprise. And it's not a surprise if they don't pass probation, because they knew what the expectation was. But what's the classic mistake here? You hire someone, it's a panic hire. You just looked at a few CVs and hoped for the best. There was no thorough process. There was no cultural alignment, and there was no enforcement of probation. Sure, it said 3 months in the contract or 6 months, but no one monitored their progress properly. You didn't get to that 3 or 6 month point and go, well, how are you doing? Are you good enough or are you not good enough? There's no proper assessment of performance. Oh, but Prague, they'll get better. I hope they'll get better. I pray they'll get better. Let's give them another 6 months. Has anyone ever made that mistake? I hope their attitude improves. 2 years later, oh, what have I done? And then it's a lot harder to get them off the bus, isn't it? Yeah, some of you have been there, haven't you? Why did I hang on to that person for so long? And it costs you. It costs you. It costs every business. So we need better, way better. Whatever the hell you're doing recruitment, it has to be better. It's an absolute given. And secondly, the enforcement of probation periods. Otherwise, why have a probation? Just hire anyone and hope for the best. Yeah, that's going to work. So some of you aren't particularly amused by that comment. You're like, oh, I've done that. That's what I did. Oh, crap. So we need the right recruitment and probation. Okay, now, allied to those mistakes, let's look at the typical org chart in a business. So you're hiring sloppily. Hopefully some of you aren't, but most are. You're hiring sloppily. Who are you hiring? What level? Now, typically the owner or the owners in the business, you guys, super experts, really good at what you do, really committed, solve every problem on planet Earth. Great. Been doing it for years and years and years, 10, 20 years, some of you more. And then who are you hiring? What level? Are you hiring people like you at that level? No. Who do most small businesses hire? Juniors. Juniors. Why? Well, we haven't got the money for someone more senior. Now, that may or may not be true. But the challenge with hiring juniors is, first of all, there's a massive gap between your skill set and theirs. Now, that gap has to be bridged. Otherwise, how can you let go if you're worried that they don't have the skills? So you could train them, and I'll talk about training in a moment. But that's a lot of training if you want people who are even close to your knowledge and your skill set. That's a serious amount of training that your training department has to do. Because you're not going to do it, are you? Because you're too busy. So your training department has to do that. Yeah, training. Yeah, where's that? Okay. So if you're bottom heavy, it's a challenge. If you're just hiring juniors, it's a challenge. Yes, they're cheap, but there's a reason they're cheap, because they don't have the experience or even close to you do. So think about whether your company, whether you've got 5 employees, 10 employees, or whatever size your business you've got, are you bottom heavy? How many second in commands, third in commands who can take on leadership and ownership of departments or teams? How many of those people do you have? Because once you get to about 5 people, you need at least one of those. So if you're a company of 30 people, you need at least 6 or 7 senior people. So are you bottom heavy? Most small businesses are too bottom heavy because they think they're saving money. And all that ends up happening is you become the bottleneck and the constraint in your business. And in fact, my philosophy when I first started hiring, yes, it was scary, terribly scary. I had to talk to my coach a lot about the fears I had about money and them screwing up and all that stuff. But my philosophy was hire the best people I could possibly afford. And that was scary because I was hiring at quite a senior level. I didn't want juniors. The only junior I hired was my very first ever hire, who's now my ops director 14 years later. But I had to train him a lot. Everyone else has been hired at a senior level. Because I knew I didn't have time or the resources to wait 10 years for them to become brilliant or screw up my business in the meantime. So are you bottom heavy? That's the other thing to consider. Now, the next strategy. So you hire your team following a proper process or not. You enforce probation or not. You go bottom heavy or not. And then this is what happens. Something happens, you're working with your customers, your clients. Oh, boss, there's a problem. They've asked these questions. I'm worried about that. What should we do? And they come to you with that question, that problem, that issue. And what do you say at that point? What does the superhero in the business, because that's you, because you're the one with the knowledge, you're the one with the experience, you're the one with the expertise. What does a superhero say? They say something like, I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. We need to look at this. Give me a few days and I'll come back to you. What's just happened to the superhero? The superhero's taken on that problem. It's become their problem. I'll resolve it because I'm the one with the expertise. What happens an hour later? There's a WhatsApp message. Oh, boss, there's a problem. There's an issue. There's a question from the client. Oh, so glad you raised that. Let me have a look. Etc., etc., etc. Compound that up over each day of each week, of each month, of each year. Superhero syndrome, we call it. The superhero who's fixing all the problems. Of course, you've got the expertise. Of course, you're the most experienced. But if you're the superhero solving all the problems all day long, who's running your business? Who's growing your business? Who's out there making more sales? Who's out there creating and defining and improving the strategy? Can't be you because you're too busy being the superhero. So your job is not to be the superhero. Your job is to build them into superheroes. The job of a great leader is to build more leaders. That's my favorite summary of leadership. And there's so many books and resources on leadership. That's my personal favorite. The job of a leader is to build more leaders, is to empower them, not to be their superhero. Otherwise, you're just keeping yourself busy forever. Now, the other two strategies I want to talk about are actually we can learn from the airline industry. And I want to share two things that the airline industry do better than almost any industry I can think of. Now, number one, every time there is a disaster, a crash, and unfortunately it does happen. We've had an example recently in India, of course, but statistically, the likelihood and the frequency of that is incredibly small. And in fact, that percentage likelihood has gone down over time, consistently over time. Now, how have they done that? How have they consistently improved their safety record? Now, the first thing that happens after every disaster, and we see it now, is they thoroughly investigate what went wrong and what they can do better. There is a massive culture of learning and improvement. It's embedded in the culture of the industry. And bear in mind, this is an industry full of very, very, very technically proficient people. And yet they are constantly looking at how they can improve, what they can learn, what they can tweak. And it's a great mindset, this culture of learning. The culture of learning should be embedded in your business. Culture of learning is not do your CPD or whatever your industry requires you to do once a year. That's a culture of ticking boxes. Culture of learning. Everything that you and your teams need to learn about how to be better at whatever it is you want to be better at is out there. It's freely available. And by free, I mean it's accessible and often free of money, free of charge. But do you have a culture of learning, of self-improvement in your businesses? In fact, do you have? I hope you do, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here today. But is that the culture that you've created in your organizations, where when something goes wrong, of course things go wrong, guys, just that's life. But is there a culture of blame and excuses, or is there a culture of what can we learn? How are we getting better? What could we have done differently? Because that's what the airline industry has done consistently over decades. And the stats prove that that's worked. Now, the other thing we can learn from this industry is their phenomenal reliance on systems. And again, if you want to be able to let go more, how good are the systems in your business? Now, systems can often sound like a daunting, overwhelming word. But a good, for me, almost like a shortcut is looking at checklists. Katie, I know you mentioned checklists in the chat box. I love checklists. Why do I love checklists? Checklists are simple to build and easy to follow. Anyone, you don't have to be an MBA to be able to read a checklist. Your junior can follow a checklist. And the interesting thing about the airline industry is, for example, when you're getting into a plane, before the plane can start moving, the pilots are going through checklists, safety checklists, and other checklists that have to be followed and adhered before they can start moving. Now, the interesting thing is pilots are actually measured on how many thousands of miles they've flown. And so you'll often have pilots who've flown, or how many hours, how many thousands of hours, like 20,000 hours. But that's even more than I've done coaching. I've done about 12, 13,000 hours of coaching, I reckon, now in 18 years. But there's pilots who've done even more than that. They've got insane amounts of experience. They are as expert as you can get. And yet, can they skip the system, the process, or the checklist? Can they just go, no, I don't need to do that. I know what I'm doing. And the answer is no. Because if they do that, people die. And it's a non-negotiable in the airline industry. They can't skip the processes and the systems and the checklists. They have to follow them. It's a condition of employment. So, how thorough are the systems in your business? If someone was to come into your business, let's say in an operational role, how clear is it laid out in terms of what they need to do and how they do their job? And this is something that actually, like McDonald's, for example, the average age of McDonald's manager who manages a restaurant, but they're in their 20s. How can a kid in their 20s run a McDonald's? Well, the answer is the kid isn't running it. The systems are. And it's because the systems are so good that they actually get away with hiring juniors and not poisoning people every day. Well, not officially anyway. That's a different discussion. But anyway, it's the power of their systems. Same here with the airline industry. So systems will set you free, but the systems need to be good enough. And secondly, the systems need to be followed and used. Oh, Parag, we've got these great systems, but they don't follow them half the time. My first question back to the owner, whenever they say that to us, is how did they pass probation? How did they pass probation? Oh, they don't do their Oh, they don't fill in their timesheets. Oh, they don't follow that system. How do they pass probation? Another mistake. You had the systems, they just weren't enforced. Another mistake. So, there's my 6 practical tips as well as the fears. Now, as ever, I just want to highlight a point. First of all, this stuff works. This is Gary. Gary is the owner of Janitorial Express, a wholesale cleaning product supplier in Islington in London. And we coached Gary back in 2010. Gary was the classic kind of everywhere, drowning. Tommy started work at 4 a.m. and all this nonsense. I said, Gary, why are you doing that? He goes, oh, we're all really busy. And then we put this stuff in place in his business over 3 years. We got this stuff embedded that I've talked to you about now. And 3 years later, he was off. He semi-exited his business, went to live in Spain, while his business still runs in London, still there now. I don't know where he is half the time, but he's not there at 4 a.m. in the morning in a warehouse because he put this stuff in place. So I just wanted to reiterate the point because I want you to do something with this. That's my point always when you come along to these sessions. What are you going to do? Do not come to one of my sessions and sit there and take notes and go, oh, it was good, and do nothing. That would be utterly pointless for you. Utterly pointless. If you want to talk to me or my team about how you do this stuff, that's great. Email me or message me on LinkedIn. That's great. If you're going to do something yourself, that's great as well. But don't just nod your head and do nothing.